be. Now, as you can see, and as was mentioned before, I have two companies, although Ban Ki-moon I've kind of just let lie, and I'm going to explain to you now the difference in these two companies, because you might think to yourself, well, what's the difference? What's the difference between a blockchain company and a cryptocurrency company? Well, they are very different. You know, if we think about blockchain is this technology that promises to disrupt and disintermediate, but it's neutral. You know, at the end of the day, it is just a technology platform. And the real interesting stuff is what we can build on top of that platform. But the cryptocurrency side of things is way more interesting, in fact. You know, when I first got into the space many years ago, we all had this idea that one day we're going to be living in a world where we don't need central bank issued currencies. You know, we can save the world, we can cheapen the cost of remittance, we can bring digital banking to the unbanked. So cryptocurrency was always the sort of thing that we aspired to have. That's what the promise of Bitcoin was. And what I want to do now is take you on a small little journey. I've been given 20 minutes, so I'm going to try and squeeze, as I usually do, as much content into this session as possible. So if you're not used to my style, as you can see, I just ramble on. But bear with me, and I'm going to take you on a small little journey which tells you why and explains why this is such a significant thing, this cryptocurrency side of things. Of course, I'm going to talk about blockchain a little bit. In fact, what I'm going to do is actually tell you exactly what it is so you all become experts. But I want to really go into the background of what's going on here. Why do we even have this thing? Where did it come from? What's the point? What need was it trying to fill? So I'm going to now take you on that little journey, and this is what CentB is now focused on, is bringing cryptocurrency to the masses, and starting here with Africa, which is the perfect place for such a thing. So obviously, first of all, let me explain to you the picture. I don't know if you recognize that picture. This was taken back probably in the 50s or 40s or 50s probably, when there was all those nuclear bomb tests, and these people were now sitting there with their sunglasses watching these explosions happen. And you know, it's ironic, you know, this thing that can cause so much destruction and you know, really ruin the world. I think a lot of people were excited about the prospects of this thing. Now, what we are facing in terms of what blockchain, the promise of blockchain and cryptocurrency can bring is something similar. You know, the status quo being disrupted and destroyed. Not that I'm an anarchist or anything like that. You know, I like systems and I like structures, but we certainly have systems out there that are archaic and probably not so great for society, and that's why cryptocurrency people are very excited about it. So that's why I wanted to put that picture up there. And also, you know, blockchain does seem like this big technical mystery, and you know, people feel that it's far beyond them. But you know, you can learn to love it too, and maybe I can tell you a little bit about that. So this whole thing about money, because at the end of the day, cryptocurrency is talking about money. It's about money. And for a lot of us, you know, when we think about money, we think about these things: pieces of paper and little coins and so on. But that's not how it's always been, at least not the kinds of money that we have today. If you notice, those coins that you use kind of look like silver and gold. That's just to kind of fool us into thinking that it is real money. But what we really have when it comes to the currencies that we use today is that these are just little sort of IOUs or promises that we make whenever we hand these things over. They're not actually what the definition of money is. And so I'm going to now attempt to take you on a journey about money, where it came from and why it is like this. And then we're going to get into the disruptive potential and the excitement that we can look forward to. And I'm not going to just talk about, in fact, I'm not going to talk anything about price projections and what you should invest in. If anything, I'm going to offer a cautionary tale. So let's just get right into it. You know, back in the early days, people used gold as money. But gold was extremely inconvenient. So very enterprising individuals would come along and say, look, I've got a very safe warehouse over here. Why don't you go and store your gold in my warehouse? And what I'm going to do is issue a little warehouse receipt. And that means at any time you can come over here and you can then redeem your little receipt for your gold coins. So this is how paper money started. But what happened then is that people just got used to holding these little warehouse receipts, and they started handing them over to each other. And what eventually happened is we kind of forgot that there was ever any real money or commodity that was affixed to this paper receipt. And then this enterprising individual, we'll call him Bob, realized that most people don't come and redeem their little warehouse receipts for their gold coins. So what he could then do is he could issue new receipts to new people. And this is now essentially what fractional reserve banking is all about, where we have this idea that there is this value that's stored in a place, and then there are all these multiple promises out there. And this is the world we live in. So if we think about the banking system, this is kind of how I guess a lot of us imagine the system is, where there's this vault somewhere with real value, real gold, and all we're doing is we're just handing each other these warehouse receipts. But this is not in fact the case. This was a very famous person, Richard Nixon, in 1971. He said, well, we're going to temporarily suspend the redemption of gold for your paper money. And that really changed everything in terms of how we think about currencies and so on. So what we've been doing is living really in a kind of monetary experiment for the last 47 or 48 years since 1971. And this is now an experiment that has been run by the central bankers, and we hope very much that they have everything under control. But as you can see, and as I'm going to show you, because of this system now that we live in, which is pretty much ad hoc, based on the kind of education and the inspiration that comes from these PhD economists up in the central banks, we are all beholden to this experiment. And very often, as a society, we can sort of be led astray by well-meaning, well-intentioned authorities, let's call them. Because what we have now is we don't have this sort of situation anymore. We don't have anything that's actually fixed our money. We don't have any basis for our money. And that's allowed central banks around the world to really just go crazy in terms of printing money. When you think about central banking, I guess we wonder what goes on in those hallowed halls over there. But at the end of the day, an economy is very much like a human being, like a person, just like you. You go and work, and you earn an income, and you have to, if you want to buy something and you don't have enough money, you borrow that money. Economies are very similar. And but central banks have that very special privilege of being able to not just earn income through taxes and to borrow money through bonds or something like that, but also the ability then to print money. So if you've never heard of the phrase or the term fiat currency is what we have today. We've got a currency that has been given to us by law. Fiat means by law. And whether you like it or not, this is what you've got to pay your taxes in, so it's well worth earning. Now, the problem with fiat currencies is when you create enormous amounts of them, and I'm going to show you some very frightening charts today. I love charts. I think charts always paint a good picture, not to be dull and boring. But what are the consequences of something like this? When you have a currency where you don't need to manage the supply. Well, if you think about, if you had a cup of tea and there was some sugar in that tea and you added more water, that tea becomes very dilute. It doesn't taste so sweet anymore. And it's the same thing with currency. If you just create currency as much as you like, eventually what you do is you dilute the value of that currency. And this is a chart of the purchasing power of the US dollar, the best currency in the world, over the last 100 years. And you can see how the US dollar has lost almost 100% of its value, so around about 98%. Now, if you think about our own currency, if you think about when you were a kid and you earned pocket money, I don't know how much you earned. I was earning a few cents really back in the old days. It was enough for a little 7-year-old. But certainly with that same money, I can't really buy very much today. So we really live in a world now where, without us knowing, there's a sort of hidden kind of tax that goes on. And what that is the devaluation of our currency. And obviously it was we could see it most apparent in Zimbabwe. If you remember in 2008, where we had this the collapse of a currency through hyperinflation. Now, when we think about hyperinflation doesn't mean the rise in consumer prices in your shopping basket. What the technical term for hyperinflation is a rapid increase in the supply of currency. All right? And if you look at the chart of Zimbabwe, this is what it looked like up until 2008. And you can see there was a clear hockey stick type curve where the central bankers decided that it would be a good idea to now hyperinflate the currency. And they had their reasons, and clearly it didn't pan out so well. But this is not unusual. In a fiat currency system, this happens all the time. And in fact, in the last 100 years, this is the 56th time this has happened. And there's a 57th. And I'm sure you're all aware of it. This is what Venezuela looks like. So Venezuela is hyperinflating right now. But in 2008, it wasn't just that there were these crazy countries, doing the bad monetary policy. In 2008, we had the global financial crisis. Now, I don't know how much of it you remember or you're aware of and how deeply it impacted you, but this was a significant event because what was happening was that, just to summarize, a lot of the private banks were giving loans to people who shouldn't have had those loans. Obviously, what happened is people started defaulting, and now the banks were essentially bankrupt. And the only way that they could be saved and rescued, because they were too big to fail, was by bailing them out. And bailing them out just means, well, you now have lost all your money, let me give you a whole bunch of money. And the central banks started doing that. And what we found, if we look now, if you go to tradingeconomics.com, by the way, which is a great website, you're going to see that the economy, the global fiat system jumped the shark. And if you've never heard of that term before, go and have a look at jump the shark, where it comes from. But this is now essentially what the US dollar did, the global reserve currency, the currency that we are essentially pegged to, if you think about a reserve currency. And so in 2008, the central bank started creating an enormous amount of currency. Now, it wasn't just the US, and it's not just Venezuela. If you go and look at this Trading Economics website, which has all these great statistics about interest rates and GDP, you're going to start, if you look at all the different countries, you're going to notice that this is now a pattern. We are now living in a hyperinflated world. If you look at China, second largest economy on the earth, and if you want to have a look at what South Africa looks like, that's what we are. So we are now in a hyperinflated world. And of course, everybody's going to say, well, Lorien, I haven't had to pay $100 billion for my eggs today, like the Zimbabweans had to do. So where's all that inflation going? If we're living in a hyperinflated world, why can't I see it in the CPI? If you've been invested in the stock market and so on, you're going to notice that since 2008, you've been doing pretty darn well, and you might have been thinking yourself being really smart. But this hyperinflation has been going into all sorts of things. If you just have a look at how this is our global stock index, FCSI, and then central bank balance sheets, which essentially is how much money they have, you can see there's been a very tight correlation with the hyperinflation that we've been seeing and the sort of boom in asset prices. And a lot of economists are now calling what we're in today the everything bubble. In 2000, there was the dot-com bubble. In 2007 and 2008, there was the real estate bubble. And now we're in the everything bubble. So it's not just real estate, it's not just tech stocks anymore. Now it's car loans, student loans, and so on. And obviously cryptocurrency, because of the monetary policy and also very low interest rates globally. So we live in a very frightening world. We're kind of looking at a world where it potentially could be like those people looking at that nuclear bomb going off, where maybe, who knows, we might find ourselves in a situation where the global currency system that we have today changes. And that's not unusual. Remember, in 1971 it happened, where the world went off the gold standard, and then 1945. There's a sort of interval of time that people have. So, in 2015, I think around about, this article came out in The Economist, and it obviously now made Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and blockchain extremely exciting. And they said it was the most important invention since the internet. But they were being very coy because they weren't talking so much about the cryptocurrency side of things, which is this money side of things. They were really trying to highlight the blockchain aspect because, as I said, that's extremely neutral and pretty politically correct. If you're a Bitcoin company or a blockchain company today, at least a cryptocurrency company, I'm sure you've probably felt that regulations and so on there's always a sort of grey area that makes things scary. And that's why we've seen so much volatility in the prices of these cryptocurrencies. Because we feel like we're in this very exciting phase where we have this new kind of digital asset, but we don't know how it's going to pan out. We don't know if regulators are going to be happy with it. Our central bank is going to sit by and allow us to trade outside of their system that they govern. Because at the end of the day, the central bank is government. And a government can't have control over the money, they can't have control over you. So this is a very politically sort of shaky thing, and that's why we're going to have volatility in the prices of these currencies for a long time. But now I'm going to take you to school, and I promise I'm going to show you about blockchain and make you an expert so you can speak with authority and impress people. If you know how banks work, banks have a ledger, and in that ledger there's accounts and balances. And what happens is when somebody wants to make a payment to a merchant, let's say, money doesn't fly from their credit card to that merchant. What you're doing is you're sending an instruction to the bank, and you're saying, please can you go and debit some money out of my account, and can you go credit my account? If you understand this, you're 90% of the way to understanding how blockchain works. So imagine a situation now where you don't have a bank that is now holding that ledger. So we have a situation now where we can remove the bank out of this picture. And what happens is next is that we get volunteers around the world to now host copies of that ledger. And they all now work in sync together to make sure that people can't, create fake transactions or corrupt the system. This is exactly what a blockchain is. It's just what we call a decentralized distributed ledger. So distributed means it's spread around the world, and decentralized means there's no single authority that has access or control over this ledger. Everybody has access to it if they have permissions to it, if you have the right access to it. But they all work together to make sure that everybody is playing fair and playing nice. And this is the essence of what a blockchain does. So if you have heard about all these amazing use cases and things, and if we have time, I hope I probably won't, but this is what it all revolves around. Another very important thing is that this ledger, once you put information in there, it never gets removed, it never gets deleted. So it's this record that gets set in stone. And why is it called a blockchain? Well, transactions are flying around the world, and every few minutes or so, these transactions are collected together and put into a block, and then the ledger is updated. A few minutes goes by, and another group of transactions gets put together in a block and linked to the last one. And that's why we have this chain of blocks, or a blockchain. If you understand that, you're now experts. You can go put it on your LinkedIn profiles and on your CVs. So what we essentially now have is this global banking system. And you can see now this is going to be extremely interesting in terms of how people move money around the world, and also because Bitcoin and these cryptocurrencies, many of them, not all of them, some of them, and this maybe can be one of the things that you look at when you want to invest in these sorts of currencies, is that they have what's called the sound money principle, which is borrowed from gold. Gold has a finite supply, which means it's going to be a good store of value over the long term. Fiat currencies aren't finite, and that's why they're a terrible store of value. So if you want to make an assessment on a cryptocurrency as an investment, make sure that it's limited. There's a famous one, Ethereum. That doesn't have a finite supply, and that's why I'm a little bit less bullish on the sort of investment prospects, although it's a good technology. But there's many reasons why people are getting into cryptocurrency, not just hyperinflation. I mean, I mentioned hyperinflation. There are many issues with the financial system that we have today that are not just, blockchain didn't come along, or Bitcoin or cryptocurrency didn't come along and start pulling people in. What's happening is people are now actively looking for alternatives to the systems that we have today. And I'm going to give you a few bullet points over here why people are so excited about this space. Well, did you know that there's this concept of negative interest rates? If you put money into a bank, you pay instead of earning interest on that. This is now in Europe and so on, and probably, who knows, maybe even the US is going to start introducing negative interest rates. They sure are talking about it. We have the bank bail-ins. What a bank bail-in means, it's the difference to a bailout. In Cyprus, it happened a few years ago, where if you have money in a bank and the bank starts to struggle because it's made some bad decisions, they can actually take money out of your account. Not temporarily, not borrow it, but actually literally just deduct money out of your account. It happened in Cyprus, and many banks around the world now are putting this sort of legislation into their fine print, that they can bail in, they can take money out of your account. If you remember a few months, was it a year or two ago, I can't remember, India started demonetizing those notes. It was a big thing. And this is actually a trend that's happening in the world today, where governments and central banks would love all of us never to use physical cash and coins again, because that is incredibly inconvenient, but more importantly, it's private. If I pay you $100, nobody knows about it. So we are now moving into a world rapidly where we are going to be forced to use digital banking systems, as what happened in India, which means that you will never be able to make a private transaction again. And this worries a lot of people, because now there's always going to be oversight on everything you make payments for, plus fees and so on. And this is driving people away from the system. Clearly, capital controls, people wanting to move money out of the country. China is well known for that. We have this very large unbanked number of people in the world, specifically in Africa. They don't have access to digital banking, and that's inconvenient for them. It would be nice for them to have access to that sort of thing. So are banks ever going to be able to reach them? Probably not. Well, now we have this global digital banking system that doesn't require KYC and all that sort of thing. Very attractive to people. Again, these types of things might not be pleasing from a regulatory point of view, but certainly from a consumer point of view, they can inspire excitement and interest. Lots of geopolitical uncertainty and risk. All I have to say is North Korea, Yemen, Syria, and so on. People are worried about putting money in certain places. Trust, and then the millennials. Don't forget millennials. I read research that said millennials would rather go to the dentist than stand in a bank queue. If they could use Facebook Bucks, they would over ABSA or something like that. So don't ever discount the next generation. You might, be sort of happy in your own space, but the younger people, especially in this digital world that we're moving into, where everything is digital, the way you express yourself, the way you communicate, the way you interact, everything that you do now is digital. That's just how little kids are growing up. They are certainly going to be excited about a digital sort of currency or payment system that doesn't require forms and that sort of thing. And then let me just quickly end up, another thing about cryptocurrency is the whole uncensorable thing. Now, I'm going to finish off on this little note because this is just another reason why cryptocurrency is so exciting, is that if you just think about Uber being this very innovative company, essentially all Uber is doing is acting as a payment intermediary. Yes, they've got a fun little app, but apps are easy, and they provide betting services and so on. But you can imagine in a world where people are paying each other directly, you don't need these sorts of services to sit in the middle. So we might think Uber is so innovative and cool, but you're going to see now in this world where people can make digital payments directly to each other, a lot of the businesses that we think are here to stay are going to be disrupted entirely. And there's a whole lot of these types of businesses: marketplaces, casinos, social networks. And these are companies that exist today. So it's going to be very hard. I'm going to finish off on this. It's going to be very hard for you to make a determination on the sorts of assets. I think blockchain is overhyped. I think that you're going to see a lot of the businesses that are involved with blockchain right now are probably going to fail. That's our .com kind of reality that we're facing. Most of these currencies are going to fail. I think this is going to be a zero-sum game. There's going to be one or two dominant currencies, and my bet is on Bitcoin plus Bitcoin Cash. Now, this is a contrarian play. You're going to have to make your own decision. I personally believe, and I'm going to have to tell you, that I think Bitcoin Cash, being a useful currency because it's so cheap right now, is probably going to win out, but who knows? As I said, I'm a contrarian saying that. But if you did want to ask my opinion on what to invest in, I know that there's going to be lots of questions around that. I'll just put that out right now. But anyway, thank you for my time. I wish I could give you more of it, but happy to answer any questions or afterwards as well. And please contact me.